Hey guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I have Jeff Alberts back on the show. He just stepped off the WNBF Worlds stage, where he placed 5th in the pro lightweight category, arguably the most competitive category on the day, and arguably the most competitive stage for natural bodybuilding that there is. At the age of 52, he presented his best ever physique. I'll say that again, 52, his best ever physique. What an incredible journey. And we're going to dive into that. This is his 14th contest season, and I wanted to know what would have made this season a success for him at the start, what challenges he faced along the way, how did he overcome those, and what led to the best physique ever. What did he learn this time round, and what is he going to apply from this season in future? We dive into all of that, how bodybuilding has evolved for him over time. There's so many nuggets of wisdom in here, as Jeff always presents. I think for any competitor, future competitor or coach, you're gonna want to listen to this whole thing. So look forward to that. And before we dive into it, if you haven't yet, please make sure you're subscribed, whether or not that's on Spotify, on YouTube, or whatever podcast provider you're using, so you don't miss out on amazing episodes in future. It only benefits you, of course. And if you can, spare a moment in time to rate us if you are on Spotify. Highly appreciate that so that the show can grow. Give us a comment if you're over on YouTube. Just saying hi is all you need to do, or a thumbs up. It's highly appreciated, and or a thumbs up. Hey, let's get both. But without further ado, let's get into the chat with Jeff. So Jeff, it's actually been about a year since you've last come on the show. I don't know, you probably don't keep tabs on that, nor do I, but I check. I like to check, especially when it feels like I haven't spoken to someone for a while. And I was surprised that it had been an entire year since we last spoke, because I think hopefully a lot of the listeners keep up with your journey to stage and what you're doing, and you're very present on social media, which I highly appreciate, and you have been over the years. So it kind of feels like I've been keeping up with you despite not having had this one-on-one time, but yeah, it's been a whole year.
It's hard to believe a whole year has gone by, but you know how it is when you get older, time just goes by super, super fast. And I think the last time I was on, if I remember correctly, we talked about recovery diet, because it's always this time of year after the shows are over with, it's like, okay,
Yes.
Let's talk about recovery. And here we are again, like after the seasons are over, probably going to talk about recovery at some point.
Well, it's a good place. I wasn't intending to necessarily talk about it a whole lot, but I am interested. Obviously, I was speaking briefly off air, and I kind of asked, how are you? And you said, better after more food. So how has that initial recovery at least gone? Are you feeling kind of recovered, or are you still in that recovery process? I guess it's only been, what is it, a handful of weeks, 3 weeks or something?
Like we're 2 weeks removed now from Worlds, and I feel a lot better, but not all the way there. And I know when I'm fully recovered, when I'm no longer food focused. So I'm still at night, I've been keeping up on good habits during the day, just eating a little more food. But then at night, I'm wanting to dive into the cupboard and eat some snacks while watching like Monday Night Football. So I know I'm not all the way there. So I don't really go by like where's my numbers are as far as body weight, that type of thing. It's more so like how I actually feel. When I have good energy, good performance, good recovery, I'm not thinking about food no more, my next meal, those types of things. And I'm not all the way there yet, but it's getting closer.
Yeah, it's that next meal, kind of thinking about that next meal. It's just, I mean, I'm far removed from prep now, but I know when I get into it, it is that kind of clock watching, what's coming next, almost like go to bed. Yeah, I want to wake up and eat breakfast.
Yeah. And I think my wife and son, they're not fully recovered yet either, because it's almost like they're demanding a lot of attention, I'm noticing. So I'm like, okay, we're not all the way back just yet.
For sure. It's good you know yourself well enough now, though, that's the key marker, because I'm sure you have it with clients, Jeff, where you take them through that process and they're, I don't know, could be 2 weeks post, and they're like, yeah, I feel like I'm back to normal. I'm like, you wait for another 2 weeks, you'll be feeling like you're at like another 100% back to normal, because natural bodybuilding preps probably should be fairly lengthy, and so you kind of lose touch with what normality was at a certain time. So yeah, I don't want to see people maintain a leaner physique just because they think they're back to normal, they want to be there versus they are actually there. So it's good,
Yeah, it's almost like people kind of base it off of like a certain look, or like I said earlier, the numbers, when it's more so I think it should be dictated by yourself, how you're actually feeling. Because
Yeah.
sometimes like you get removed from like your ability to be in touch with yourself because you're so rigid with prep. You're focused on numbers and hitting targets. You kind of lose, touch of like what you're actually experiencing, what you're actually feeling. And I know we're going to talk about my prep, but there was a big moment in it where I wasn't even weighing myself anymore
Oh, wow.
or
Okay.
or keeping track of the logbook or any of that stuff because I wanted to be more connected to what my actual experience was.
That's interesting. Yeah, I guess we can start digging into that. Obviously, like we said, you've just come off the WNBF World stage. This was your 14th season, I believe. Have I got that number right? I don't want to get it
Oh
wrong.
my gosh.
I
Like
counted them up.
I, if you say so, I'm gonna
Based
believe it
off your
because I'd
post.
I'd have to go like start counting on my fingers, like
Yeah.
going back. So yeah, that sounds
1993 was the first, correct?
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
first one. I'm pretty confident of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's probably somewhere in there, 14, 15, somewhere in there. There's probably a couple failed preps in there as well. So yeah,
Sure.
lots of season, lots of experience. So yeah.
Yeah, I think people, just on that note, you said failed preps. Me and Pascal have talked about it a few times on like the improvement season, just saying how like people don't realize how many like athletes try and make it to stage and it just doesn't work out for them. I think like it probably equal to the number you see on stage also didn't manage to quite get there.
Yeah, how it is. Like you finish a season, maybe you didn't get the placing you're hoping for. You feel like it's a failure, but the reality is that there's a lot of people that don't even make it to the finish line. So I think that in itself is just a huge accomplishment. Is like think about the world population. How many people are actually like doing what we're doing, getting down to like 6, 7% body fat and doing this crazy thing. Like there's not too many. It's like a very small percentage. So just to cross that finish line, especially at my age now, like it's like a deeper appreciation for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's actually the starting question I had for you is if I was to ask you before you went through your 14th contest prep, what would make it a success? What would your answer be? So, what would have made this season a success at the start?
Mm,
I don't know if it changed by the end and now like it's a success for a different reason, but I'd
yeah,
love to know that.
because I struggled with a why. Like when I first started prepping back in January, like I was kind of like excited but not excited at the same time. Like I wasn't excited about getting up, going outside in the dark and the cold and doing steps. It took me a while to kind of get some momentum going. And as I was kind of going deeper into it, I was like, why am I doing this? Like I've done this, like you said, 14, 15 times. I've found success on the world stage, placed high, won pro shows. Like, why am I doing this? And why do I want to put my family through another prep? Because I know the deeper I get into it, of course, the hunger issues, the sleep issues, all of that, it starts to disrupt like, normal living. So I was struggling for a good while, like trying to really find a strong why. And it was almost like I was searching for a singular why. Because, when we first started out, we're very motivated. I want to get in there. I want to get straight. I want to crush it. I want to do well, place high, win a show or whatever. I experienced that. And then I experienced the flip side of like not being successful and being depressed about it and like I don't want to do this thing ever again, and then finding joy in it, changing the why to I just want to have fun. And then it went from like having fun to I want to win a pro show because I won pro cards. So it's like all these different types of whys I've experienced, and I this prep was almost like I was searching for the one thing. And I realized I had help though. Like one of my athletes, my aunt from Israel, she was like, Jeff, you just need to be just one day at a time and just have fun and just be. And she meant, in a sense, just be free with it. Like, don't put so much pressure on yourself or things like that. And I kind of just realized, like, yeah, I don't need to have a specific why. And the why I'll probably end up finding later down the road. So, and that's the thing. I know with you, Steve, like you're very reflective. Like the longer you take time to reflect, you start to discover more and more things about the prep, the reasons, the purposes, just having a lot more clarity. So I've allowed myself to basically just be free and just let it come. And I keep like even now, 2 weeks removed, every day I'm kind of reflecting, like seeing little nuggets along the way, like, oh, okay, like I'm getting deeper appreciations for this certain aspect. But it was a struggle. Like, because, you know, when you've done something for so long, you kind of lose a little bit of the passion and the spark for it. And prep is not easy. You know, it takes you to some dark places. And I was like, why do I want to do that again? So, but I'm glad I did. I'm glad I persevered through it, come out the other side, and, you know, here we are talking about it.
Yeah, I think when I think about this question, and for a lot of competitors who have done seasons, it's like, hey, my why is to beat my last best or something like that. Whereas, as we've said multiple times, like you've done double digit seasons, so beating your last best and being in your 50s now, I guess that's something that was on your mind was like, is that still a why to beat my previous best?
There was a pressure with that because when you're older, you can't, like, at least for me personally, like I can't train like 10 years ago. Like I can't put numbers up like I used to. It's harder to recover. The family dynamics different. My son is older, so it's a little bit more challenging with that. So I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to try to like at least live up to the past expectation. Like, hey, I placed fourth at Worlds in 2014 or won a pro show. So I have to kind of stay on that level. And you're a 3D muscle journey coach. So you have to come in dialed in because otherwise you're going to look soft and you know, you're not going to look the part. So there was definitely some pressures with that. But I also realized like, okay, wait a second. Like I know it's more about fulfilling the current potential. So I had to really kind of like dig deep and think about like, or just come to the conclusion like, hey, if I better myself, great. If I don't, it's all good as long as I'm still fulfilling the current potential. May not be as good as it used to be, but at least I know deep down like I did everything I could to be at my current best. And I think as long as I was doing that, you know, I'm okay with the outcome. But I mean, according to Eric Helms, and I mean, I've looked at the footage and all that, so I'm not 100% sure yet. But according to him, like this is the best ever, the best physique I've ever put up. I don't think it's the biggest physique, but I think from an overall balance, as far as like having size, conditioning, shape, presentation, according to him, this is the best physique I've ever put out, which was not really a expectation of me, you would say. So I kind of surprised myself a little bit in that regards. But also, I look up to Marshall Johnson. So I look at people who've done it before me, like Marshall Johnson. Obviously, it's like you know, been doing this for years. He's still competing in his early 60s. And when I first competed against him back in 2014, he was about my age now. And that same year, he went on to win like the lightweight world championship at the Yorton Cup. So I'm like, well, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. So now it's like, now that I've gone through this, I'm realizing like, okay, your early 50s is not like a death sentence for progress. Like there's other forms of progress outside of just like putting on size. You can definitely get more condition. You can pose better. You can peak better. You can prep better with family, those types of things. So I still feel like now moving ahead, there's still growth for me if I choose to do it. And
Yeah,
that's
I
a big,
like.
big if I choose to do
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
come to that. I really like that actually, because again, for myself, if someone was to ask me the next time I compete, I'd be like, oh, to beat my last like best. But actually, I kind of like the reframing that you gave that in terms of, hey, just doing your best at this current moment. It doesn't have to be beating last time. It just has to be the best you can do this time, and like not leaving any stone unturned or whatever you want to call it. It's just, hey, under the circumstances you're currently in the body you're currently in, do the best with what you've got. And I think that's the kind of philosophy I think 3DMJ tend to take as a whole. Like, hey, don't focus on, it's kind of a stoic philosophy in many ways. Hey, don't focus on the uncontrollables, focus on what you can control and what you can do. And that in its own right is kind of stress relieving because, as we all know, you can't control who comes to stage. As like Eric said, it's your best physique to this point, but you've actually placed higher at the WNBF Worlds by like one placing, of course, a different category, like different people. So you just can't control that outcome at all. So I think that at least I imagine you haven't had for many seasons, you haven't had the goal of, hey, I'm going to place better than last time, because you just are so hyper aware that that's just way out of your hands.
It's definitely out of my hands. Like I'm definitely like realistic with that. But at the same time, like anybody else, I'm competitive. So even though I had the feelings of like, I don't know if I can still duplicate my past, like I still wanted like, oh, let's see if I what I can do. So actually, I'm like, okay, I'm trying to get top. I wanted top three because I've been fourth. I'm like, okay, if I can get third, and it's an external improvement, right? In the minds of others, like, okay, you bettered yourself or whatever. But I know deep down whether or not I'm successful or not, just by fulfilling that potential. But yeah, to be honest, when they announced me as fifth, it was a little bit of a like, ah, man, yeah, it was like a little moment. There was like, man, I didn't move up, but it was very short lived as far as having that disappointment because I realized like for 52 to arguably be in the best shape of my life and to compete at a world championships that's now being represented with over 50 countries versus in 2014 there was only 23. So it's expanded. So the talent pool has expanded. And I knew that going in, like this is going to be probably one of the most competitive shows in history. And to do it at my age, I'm like, and I had the opportunity to either do masters or open. They won't allow you to do both. They won't let you cross over. So I'm like, hey, let's just go open. Let's just see where I stand. Because I didn't want the regret of not doing it and then have like looking back going, oh, maybe I should have done it. So whether I, place well or didn't, at least I kind of know now moving ahead where I can kind of go. It's like, okay, I still right now I'm still relevant. Like I can still hang with some of the best out there, even at my age. So, but yeah, I'm competitive still. Like when I'm on stage, I want to do well. But it was, yeah, when I came off stage, it was a little bit of a disappointment because I didn't crack that top three, but very short lived. Because once I got, you know, came off from backstage, went to the lobby. Everybody's there to greet you, your family, your friends, everybody's saying, great job. You looked awesome. It's like you forget about the placings really quick.
Yeah, I think I think anyone who's competitive, anyone who competes in bodybuilding, you have a competitive nature about you. That's why you kind of really do it. So I think everyone has that sensation. I know my previous, like 2021, I had the same at many shows where I went in where I was like, hey, I'll be happy if I get this. And even if I got that like on the lower end of where I wanted to be like top three and I came third, I'd still be like, why didn't I come second? But like you said, it's kind of short lived. You kind of respect it. And also, like you mentioned, a top five, like a fifth placing versus a fourth, as we mentioned previously, like you don't control who turns up, and there was way more competitors. I think your lightweight class, the pro class, was it was the most stacked class, arguably the most competitive. The most competitive. They were all really competitive. Like it was kind of crazy this year, and like the most competitive worlds I've seen for the last, I don't know, handful of years. I guess post COVID, absolutely the most competitive. So that's a huge win for you. And did it give you a bunch of like confidence, or did it give you kind of like a feeling of like belonging as a bodybuilder again?
Exactly.
Maybe something that was lacking.
That was because the confidence and insecurity it was there because the lack of confidence, I should say. It's like because the last time I competed was 2019 and I was 48, already creeping up there in age, and I got sixth at Worlds, and it was probably the worst look of the season. So I'm further removed from that. I had went up to over 200 pounds in 2019, let go of a lot of habits. It wasn't the best recovery, let's just say. So it was almost like I had a not so great body composition. I was older, then COVID hit and all that. And it was like, okay, now I got to go from this big time dad bod to now, okay, I got to get back into world level, shape. So it was like a good 2-year process of trying to do that. So the confidence, was not very high. But now doing the damn thing and realizing like, hey, I can still hang with these young kids. It's almost like now I feel like, okay, I can still do this. If I, choose to prep again, I can still hang on the world level. For how long, I don't know, but there's only one way to find out is to get in there and do it. How many times have we seen competitors, first time competitors, they're scared to actually compete and like, I need more size. I'll wait, 5 years, 10 years go by and they never even done it, never experienced it. So I know just the best way to kind of to learn and to see is to actually do it. But yeah, it was crazy, man. Like it was a good feeling knowing like a top five in a class of 16 and literally all the guys that placed ahead of me were different countries, which is awesome. that just shows how the sport's totally evolved and grown. And they're like half my age.
Yeah, it's um, the fact that you didn't give up when you're at such a point where like kind of a low and you just kept going, I think speaks to a general message that I see from you is just that element of consistency and just continuing to do the damn thing and always looking for areas that you can improve. So I absolutely love that. And I was going to ask actually a question was how long was this prep? Because I don't know if there was like a clear start point for you and like a starting body weight that you had. How long was it for you?
I mean, so if we can go back, let's see, what year is this? 23 to 22, like the middle of 21 is when I was kind of at my lowest, highest in body weight, but at my lowest as far as like habits and things like that. I remember it was at my wife's sister's wedding, and I told her this is the last weekend that I'm like just diving into chocolate cake and having wine and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get back into some better habits because my cholesterol level was actually high. Like I was diagnosed with high cholesterol. And I was 50 years old at the time, and my on my dad's side of the family, they have a history of heart issues. So I'm like, okay, this is more than just bodybuilding at this point. This is more about overall health. So, long story short, cleaned up some habits, improved the cholesterol. Not 100%. I actually had to get put on statin because just with the habits alone, it didn't change. Even with contest prep, I thought maybe it would kind of improve health significantly, which it did, but not enough to get me in the safe level. So I had to be put on a statin. So it's like literally like a 2 year or more journey of like coming down in body weight. And then in January, I should say last year I was trying to prep, but the middle of the year, July, August, just too many things were going on in life that I had to put it on the back burner. So I stopped the prep. Didn't allow myself to gain too much weight back though. And then in January, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this again. So since January, I've been prepping, but it's been more of the Monday through Friday thing where it's like, pretty solid habits. I'm on point. The weekend, I kind of let up a little bit. So the progress was really, really slow. Like I said earlier, I didn't want to get out there and do the steps. So it was just like slow progress. And then it wasn't until about 3 months away from the Washington show that I needed to qualify for Worlds, where I was like, okay, I need to make a hard commitment here. And that's where I was struggling as far as the why. Why do I want to do this? So eventually I finally made that hard commitment and then I got really dedicated. So you can kind of say like what I learned through this year is that if I want to compete in the future, I probably do need to go back to my roots as being that hardcore bodybuilder and just go hard for like three months at a time. So keeping my body weight at this point, because I'm 52, I don't need to be 190, 200 pounds anymore. I can probably hang out around a 180, 182, which is about 10, 12, 15 pounds over stage weight. And if I want to prep, just prep for 3 months and go hard and not have like, because I've been on your podcast before talking about balance, right, with family and all that. But what I kind of learned this last year is that it actually was harder on the family to do the Monday through Friday thing and then be free on the weekends for a full year versus just having a 3 month stretch where I just have a conversation with my wife, like, I'm going hard right now. So I'm going to be tapped out for 3 months, but you'll get me back after that. So I'd rather be present 9 months out of the year versus like strung out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that
So
makes a
I'm
lot
kind
of
of
sense.
learning, like if I could go back in time, like back to 2014, where I was preaching the balance thing, longer preps, it's almost like, well, here's some other context that I've learned over the last decade. Yeah.
Always learning. That makes
Yep.
sense. Kind of ripping off the band-aid versus like slowly like letting it
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. So it's almost like, yeah, it's just the context changes for each person. Like as time moves on, your own journey evolves. So things you might have done 10 years ago don't apply today. Like what I did this prep, what I'm saying now, I might change my mind a year from now. I might say, no, I think we need to go back to that. So it just kind of depends. But I think this definitely worked out really well where I kind of just had to make that hard commitment, have that conversation with my wife, She understood. She's fine with it. The only thing that really killed her with this prep was the sleep issues. Because I was waking her up in the middle of the night. I would wake up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, like the last month of prep. It was horrible. Even with melatonin and all that, and doing all these things trying to improve sleep. When you're 6% body fat or whatever it is, and you're eating, 15, 16, 1700 calories and doing 15,000 steps, like your body doesn't want to sleep. It wants to eat. So I was driving her nuts. I was driving her nuts with the sleep.
Have you noticed your sleep? Has that improved over preps, or has it like you got it to a point where it's like, hey, this is as good as it's going to be?
This prep was probably the worst the last month or two. And that's because I I probably got leaner than I've ever been, I would say. So I think that was a whole nother level. The calories got pretty low there towards the end. And that was an interesting conversation I had with myself, an internal conversation while eating lunch, because I was always having two pita breads. It's funny these weird conversations we have with ourselves during prep that
Yeah.
seem so silly when we're removed, right? Like, I want my two pita breads. And they're like,
Yeah.
but no, Jeff, you need to drop your calories if you want to make more progress. So you need to remove one of those, just eat one. I literally had a 5-minute conversation with myself about that. And I finally was like, okay, you're being stupid. You're being dumb. Just eat the one and just move on. So yeah, it just gets that crazy towards the end. At least it was for me. But it brought me back to my roots, because that's how I used to prep back in the day. I would do whatever it took to get in shape.
And I guess with that more aggressive approach, there's only so aggressive you can go, or was it like, I'm thinking, hey, if you go too aggressive, you risk muscle loss. Was that something that was on your mind, or were you like, hey, I'm going to go as aggressive as I can without thinking I'm going to risk any excessive muscle loss at this point?
Yeah, I mean, there was like, I picked my spots pretty well. It's like, I had a 10-day stretch, 12-day stretch where it's like no refeeds, really low calories, pushing hard on steps. The smart thing I was doing is like not going too hard in the gym, like, making sure I was pacing that pretty well. But the way I was kind of gauging things was, if I felt like I could adhere to it, like it was just getting over the top, then I would just eat. I wouldn't go crazy, but I would eat more food, back off on steps, just take a day off or two. Moments where I felt okay, like, you have those days where you're kind of just grinding on the same protocol and you're like, it's hard, but it's like manageable. Then I wouldn't change anything. I would just keep going. And then days when it was really easy, like, oh, I'm not hungry, I feel energetic, those are the days I would kind of just like, let me just drop 200 calories off today or do some more steps or something like that. So I was using a lot of auto regulation. But the calories, I will say, like, I've had my calories as low as 1,500 in the past at certain points of prep, but not in the last 10 years. So to be honest, I forgot what it kind of felt like to kind of get really dark. And I think the reason I was able to do it this time, Eric was a big part of that. When he came down before our first show, he came down, he stayed at my house for over a week. My wife and son went to Cancun on vacation. So it was just Eric and I here at the house by ourselves. It was a bodybuilding camp for a week at my house. From the time we woke up to the time we went to sleep, that's all we did was bodybuild. So it was almost like we were feeding off each other's energy. So it's like 1,500 calories. Yeah, let's do it. I didn't have to worry about being a dad or a husband or anything like that. So it kind of just took me back to some of the roots. And I appreciate this stuff now going through it, because as a coach, sometimes when you're not in the thick of it, because I haven't prepped since 2019. So the time before that was 2014 when I got on stage. And then, like I said, getting really dark, that wasn't like back when I was in my 30s. So it was like reconnecting to the grind in a sense, like, because I think as a coach, you hear sometimes like experience, you don't have to have the experience, and you do. I think it plays a big role. So it keeps me connected. So now it's almost like I could put myself in my athlete's shoes, like maybe when they need to be pushed harder than I think, but I'm a little reluctant because maybe I'm too empathetic. It's like, no, if you really want to go to where you want to go, this is what you have to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. Without going there, you don't really know what that feels like, especially if, like you said, you can have competed, but if you never really got that kind of elite conditioning that like everyone is, well, not everyone, but many of us are targeting who have competed many times. You don't really know what it's like it feels like, and so you don't know what they should be feeling like. So then it's like, how do I gauge if I'm pushing them too much or too little?
Yeah.
How do I tell them that they need to like I don't know, nut up, or like that we need to pull back? And this auto-regulation that you did sounds like only something that you can have done once you've got a lot of experience under your belt. And that's something, I guess, with clients, you try and help them auto-regulate, because you know kind of what you're looking for, but they don't necessarily know it on themselves. And it just requires them, at least in my experience, it requires the athlete to have good communication skills, because that can be hard. They keep stuff to themselves or whatever it is.
It's like the conversation we're having right now about this stuff. This is like 30 years of experience talking, so it's like someone who's in their first or maybe even second season, like maybe they're not ready to dig like that. But it is. Oftentimes people are very motivated and they want to be elite, like right now, and they want to be pushed hard. But it's like sometimes it's a hard decision for a coach, because if you push them too hard, how's that going to impact not just them, but people around them and things like that? So I'm always thinking about that stuff too. It's especially on my side, 38 years of training and all that. It's like you still have 3 or 4 decades ahead of you. Like you don't have to accomplish all this today. You've got plenty of time. But the sport has evolved in the last few years. I mean, I know you've seen it, like the conditioning. It's like guys are getting in elite level conditioning at an early age now, where we could look at a decade ago, we would probably be saying, well, it's most of the older guys that are getting in, they got that muscle maturity. It's like, well, wait a second. We have Ben Schuster here is 21 years old, and he looks like his physique looks like he's 40, and that's a positive 40, not a negative 40. Like he just looks nutty at an early age. So it's the standards of elevating. And so it's almost like now as a coach, you kind of have to, how do you coach that?
It's finding that balancing act. And I guess again, it's finding the right approach for the person in their context. Like, hey, is it a pull a band-aid off prep, or is it a slower, more methodical kind of approach? And I imagine the pull the band-aid is kind of for someone like yourself who has a lot of experience, who can truly, hey, blinkers on, I can go. Whereas a lot of people don't have that skill set at the start of like when they're competing. What's the things you've struggled with prep, or the things that you found hardest, the things that you dislike about prep the most, the kind of cons of it, has that changed over time? What was kind of what's the biggest con for you right now versus what it was in the past?
The grinding and all that, like the hunger, the lack of energy. I mean, it's hard to deal with, but that's not the worst part of it for me. Like I can deal with that. I know what to expect. Like I knew I was going to be hungry, dropping calories down. I'm like, okay, I'm going to embrace it. I'm not going to spend 5 hours in the kitchen trying to fight that. It's more the time commitment to prep, like getting in the steps, like just, okay, I have to spend an hour of my day or more. Sometimes it's like hour and a half, 2 hours, just walking. And then I have to spend another hour and a half training. I mean, and then I have to focus on, I got to hit these macros. So I do have to spend a little time in the kitchen to make sure I'm nailing these things down. It's time and energy away from the more important things in life, like my wife, my son. Like I said, the last 2 weeks, they're demanding more attention from me. They know I'm done with prep, so they're demanding of it. And I'm like, wow, like it makes me realize like, wow, I really was not here for 3 months. That bothered me. That was a big part of like, do I really want to put my family through this again? Because I knew how much time and energy it took to get in the type of shape that it was in. So it was super important for me that they actually go to Worlds and they're present. And that was a big motivator for me as far as trying to place top 5, top 3, but at least top 5, so I can do a posing routine so they can actually see me on stage by myself, because I felt like they deserved that. They deserved to see dad up there for a minute by himself doing, and it could show them like why I actually did what I was doing. So I'm just like thankful that, because backstage when they were kind of calling top 5 to do posing routines, Well, 4 people called before me, and I'm like, oh
Sure.
shit. Yeah. So when they called me like the 5th one, I was like, okay, thank goodness I get to do a posing routine. And that's not part of shows, like for me personally, I like the most because I feel like it is an artistic expression. Like that's your minute to show everybody there your art, what you've been working on, and in my case, working on for decades. So I take it to heart. I take it serious. I didn't really practice a posing routine this time because I used the old one because I didn't, like I said, the time commitment to prep. I didn't have the time to actually practice posing and create a new routine. So I was like, okay, let me just use the old one. No, I just went through it like 3 times. I'm like, okay, I got it. And I performed it, nailed it. And my son like totally appreciated it. But yeah, it's just like I said earlier, the time commitment. That's what drove me insane this time around.
That makes sense. And yeah, when I saw you posted your posing routine, I was like, I kind of recognized that. It was the music that I recognized. I was like, that's specific music I don't hear many competitors using. I feel like that's a Jeff Alberts tune.
Yeah, that one. What I like about it is there's a lot of choreography to it, but when you hit a pose, you actually can hold the pose for a couple seconds and people can actually see.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, some routines are just really fast, choppy, and you don't really get to see competitors in a certain pose for very long.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
Or with the classic now, it's all like almost like a dance routine, and they just flow into poses. So you don't really hit a pose for very long.
Yeah.
So it was a nice change because I think a lot of people have been inspired by the classic routine, so they've been going down that route, which I understand that they're like incredible. But yeah, I like the music, the techno or whatever that genre is. I really enjoyed it. So if people should check that out over on your Instagram, or I think it was at the end of a recent YouTube video where you did like a recap.
Yeah,
so
I put it
people
at the end,
people should check that out. And I totally understand the kind of time element. I think a lot of people underestimate that when they're first getting into prep, like the amount of again, they don't consider even like the time traveling to a venue and like having to be there the night before for a tan, and obviously like you said, the steps or the time practicing posing. Some of these things, like you've got that posing kind of pretty well nailed down, so you don't have to put as much time towards it as maybe other people might have to. But also the energy, so like you might have the time, but have you got the energy then to give it to someone?
Like
so
yep,
I can absolutely see that. And you really obviously notice it post show, because then you're like, oh, I don't have to do that, and also I've got all this energy to do this. So I can totally see that that's something that would take you away from the process, because it isn't fun. But at least, as you notice this time around, it's short term, it's short lived, so it's something that you might be able to like, hey, I can manage that, knowing that I can come back into kind of normality at relatively good speed. But for people listening, they now, if they haven't competed, they have a good awareness that this sort of thing happens, and you can warn loved ones and partners and friends that this is going to happen, but like they won't believe it as well as when they see it.
Oh yeah, it's a different animal when you actually start experiencing it. Like, I mean, as coaches, I think you and I both do a pretty good job of like educating and informing our athletes, but it's different once they start going through it. That's where they start to really get the education. But it's the sport is very obsessive. People get locked in, and I'm not a stranger to it. I get locked in, like, it's like, I want to prove a point. I want to see if I can hang as an older. That was a motivator. Part of it was like, okay, I'm 52. Let me see if I can still hang. Let me see if I can get a top 3. I'm going to go there, and of course, having Eric here motivating me even more and instilling more confidence. It's like, okay, we're gonna grind out the last 5 weeks. We're gonna make it happen. But I can tell that I was getting more distant from the real world. It was like I was just so locked in. Everything evolves around like 24/7.
Yeah.
Time you wake up, you're like, okay, got to make sure I get my steps in, got to make sure the food is on lock, got to make sure my training's in there. Like you said, thankfully I didn't have to practice too much posing, but a lot of athletes do have to devote a lot of time and energy to that. You know, by the time they get done with everything at the end of the day, if they're like me, like 7 o'clock in the evening, I'm on the couch watching, TV with my son, and I'm falling asleep 5 minutes later, and he's like, are you going to stay awake? So it's almost like you have a guilty feeling like I just invested all this energy today into this sport, but the real life stuff's getting put on the back burner. Like that can be an issue, especially if you have a family that's not 100% understanding of what you're trying to do. That's why communication, and like I always stress that, like with my athletes and with myself, like let me make sure that I'm informing my family of what I'm actually doing and what I have to do. And in a sense, checking in with them too, because we might think we're doing fine. Like how many times in the middle of prep, you think, oh, I'm doing a good job of balancing stuff out. But if you ask your significant other, how am I doing? How am I really doing? Then you'll probably get more of the truth there. I did an IG live, like it was last week. It was last Sunday. My wife and I, we went for a walk. We were visiting her sister for Thanksgiving. And then we went for a walk. And I'm like, you want to do an IG live with me? She's like, what's that? And I'm like, we'll just get in on there. We'll talk to people and they could ask you questions. Like, and she's like, whatever. So I'm like, okay, they're going to ask you about my prep. So you're going to be able to tell them the real truth. So yeah. And she went in there. She talked about the sleep. Yeah.
Like, for God's sake, I'm underslept because he's underslept.
Oh yeah.
It's making me grumpy now.
Yeah, now you got two grumpy people in the house.
Yeah.
At least she wasn't hungry though. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Actually, something you spoke about earlier, I did want to reflect on this. You spoke about kind of not weighing in, not logbooking. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And did that also come into like macro tracking, calorie tracking? Did you pull away from that at all? I know Alberto's done almost preps where he's done it that way. I think Eric's done portions at least doing it that way.
I didn't remove the macro tracking. Like I still kept track of my calories. I wanted to stay on top of that. But as far as like weighing in, I stopped doing it because it was causing me stress. Like white noise in a sense, like putting my training numbers in the spreadsheet. Like I literally have my computer, my laptop on my desk, like my little desk there in my gym with the training program up. And I was like, every set's over, I'd go over there and log it in. And I'm like, I was just getting stressed out by it. Like, it's like white noise to me. Like, why am I putting numbers in here? I know I'm 52, I'm getting older, but I have a pretty good memory. Like I know what I did last week. So like, okay, I did 9 reps last week. Okay, let me try to get 10. If I get 10, great. If I don't, no big deal, as long as I'm hitting proximity to failure. Because I know if I do that, I'm going to get a stimulus regardless, because my mind is the only thing that knows numbers. My muscle knows effort. So I just use principles. I'm like, why am I tracking everything? I don't need to track anything anymore, at least temporarily during the prep, to remove some of the stress. And this is all around the same time of struggling with the whys and do I really want to do all this? So what I did was I just tried to remove as much noise as possible to free up my mind, to free some space up. So I was like, let me just use principles. I know how to train. I know, like, I have good form. I know where proximity to failure is. I know about how much volume to do. I know which exercises that work for me. So I'm like, I don't need to track this stuff. So I removed that. Even music, like some music was kind of irritating me. And I realized, like, I just need to train with nothing. And it got me more connected to the training. So instead of focusing on music selection and spending time, wasting time there, I just removed it. Like, let me just train with nothing. And then I started training to the TV as far as sports and stuff, just as background. So I did that. And the weigh-ins, it was almost scary dropping weigh-ins, because obviously we use weigh-ins to kind of guide like what rate of loss we're seeing, things like that. We don't want to be overly aggressive or too conservative. But I would just use the visuals, use my experience, assess my physique. Do I look like I'm losing weight? Do I feel like I'm losing weight? Meaning, how hungry am I? Where's my energy levels at? Like I said, the days where I felt like energetic, felt pretty good and not too hungry, and like, okay, I can eat less today. Days where it's like, I'm ready to eat my own arm off. Like, that's not a good day to try to push. So I was basically just using that as my guide. And it wasn't until the last month of prep where I started to track my weight again and log like my calories into a spreadsheet. Because I gave the keys to Alberto for peak week. So he needed the data to set that up. So that was the only reason why I went back to data collecting. And that was a big step for me. Well, I've given him the keys in the past, but I knew heading into Worlds, like that last week, I had athletes myself. I had to travel. I had to travel with family. So I had to wear a dad hat, a husband hat, a coach hat. I'm like, I don't need to stress over like my own stuff. So I'm like, let me just let Alberto do it. And I trust him. And I just basically followed his plan like a soldier. And that helped out tremendously as far as like just alleviating some of the stress during that week. And what was interesting about that week, in order to make the weight, I had to do a gut cut and a water cut to make the lightweight class. And that was the worst 2 days of prep. That was the worst. Yeah.
I saw some of you. I mean, you talked about the gut cut a little bit. I would have loved you to have vlogged that. That would have been super interesting. Slash, it would have just been funny seeing you having to go through that and suffer. Yeah. What did that entail exactly for people who aren't aware?
So, like, we know how I peak. I peak well when I have more of a midweek load, and then kind of taper off because I'll get full but a little spilly looking, and then I clean up after a moderate day or two. So what was tricky was the weigh-in was on Friday. The show, like, I had to get on stage on Sunday. So we knew we had time to like fill out as far as like rehydrating and things like that. But we needed to get the carbs in while gut cutting. And, so trying to get like everything removed out of me to make a weight class. So it was like whey protein and fruit juice for a day. And we're talking like 400 to 500 carbs worth of fruit juice to get the glycogen in there, but not way too much, right? So that day wasn't too bad because it was just one day of it. But then the second day got rough because that was a travel day. So I'm like, I got to fly with juice. I go, that ain't going to work. I'm going to be living in the bathroom, So it was like fruit snacks, gummy bears, whey protein that day, and then cutting water off at around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And that was a Thursday. The weigh-in was Friday. You had till 3 o'clock to weigh in. So I waited till around 1 in the afternoon. And that morning, I didn't have anything to drink, nothing to eat. And I love my coffee in the morning. And so it was no coffee, no nothing. So by the time I got to that weight, I was hangry. And poor Eric got the wrath of the Godfather, let's just say. Like, I was so moody. And thankfully, I wasn't around my wife and son because they ventured off to go, like, tour Seattle. So they weren't around. But I was grumpy. It was moody. And then when I went to weigh in, I was 0.8 over the limit. And they told me, you got till 3 o'clock, so you could come back and weigh again. So at that point, I was done. I'm like, I'm good. I don't care. I'll just go into the middle weights. And then Brad, he's like, no. I'm going to go get some gum and you're going to spit in a cup. So for an hour and a half, we're in my hotel room, like chewing gum and spitting in a cup, tried to urinate as much as I could, went back down to weigh in and was right on the button. So again, like even, I've been doing this for so long, and a lot of times I'm self-coached and there's some pride with that, but I think it's important to have humility and let other people coach you. And so I gave Alberto the keys. I let Eric, in a sense, be my emotional support the week he was here. And I let Brad kind of take the reins as far as making sure I made the weight on that specific day. So if I didn't do that, I probably wouldn't have done as well as I did. But yeah, that was the roughest thing. So what I learned from that is, if I'm going to compete again at Worlds in a lightweight class, I'm going to come in 2 or 3 pounds leaner. So I don't have to go through that process again. It was not fun. I know powerlifters do it, but they don't do it at 6% body fat. That was rough.
Yeah, that sounds, it's such a, obviously, to store the glycogen that you're doing, that's like adding weight. And so it's like, how do I balance this whilst also not kind of bringing like the worst would have been, because I had a similar scenario with one of my clients where he was right on the cusp of middle weight to either or a lightweight. So I was like, we want to be like a heavy lightweight. So we practiced like a rapid backload, thinking maybe we could do that like the day before. And it was just like, hey, that's too much kind of food content. It's going to be a stressful day. Like we can't run that. So we were trying to balance things, like slowly taper carbohydrates up. Luckily, he just responds better as like a linear load, basically each day going up. He just absorbs them. He doesn't get any softer. But yeah, your situation is way more stressful, because on his, we kind of accepted, hey, if he's a middle, he's a middle. But you'd gone through quite a stressful thing to then have to just be like, hey, I might not even bring my best because I just had to do like such a strange peak here. So I'm glad it worked out in the end, because that would have been super frustrating.
It was frustrating when I didn't make the weight. I was 0.8 over. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. It's like, at that point, I was just so done. I was so done with it. I'm like, I don't care if I'm a middleweight. I've been a middleweight in the past. It's all good. But yeah, Brad's like, no, we came this far. We gotta finish this out. So yeah, I mean, luckily it worked out, but yeah, never again. I don't want to go through that process again. Actually, I had one of my athletes go through the same process because we were trying to get into the bantams. But he seemed to respond a lot better than I did. Like he dropped a lot more weight than I did. But yeah, it's not something like I usually run with athletes, because most of the times, it's like local shows or regional shows. Like you have to win the whole thing to get a pro card anyway. So it's like, you don't want to risk like ruining your physique just to make a lighter class, because you have to win the whole thing anyways. But like a show like this, world level, where they're breaking classes down like this, that it makes a huge difference whether you're on the high end of a lighter class or the low end of a higher class. Like, because I always like historically, I'm always a light middleweight, and I always get out muscled every time. So it's a struggle. So I'm like, my thought was get into the lightweights. I might be a big lightweight. Well, that kind of backfired, because I got 4 guys ahead of me were pretty jacked. So
yeah, I can't believe they must have light skeletons or something, because those guys look freaking like huge. I'm just like, what? This makes no sense.
Tall and like not as heavily muscled. It was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's just how it is nowadays.
Yeah, and then Wayne, I imagine Dirk was one of the lighter guys on that stage, but again, he's not a tall individual, and like he has a great package.
Yes.
Was there anyone else on, actually talking of Dirk, obviously he's a 3DMJ athlete, did incredible. I was there with him at 2021 when he won the whole thing as an amateur, and then to see him go as a pro and again take the lightweight pro class was incredible. Was there anyone else that kind of you saw on the day that were like, you mentioned Benjamin, was there anyone else that or it could be Brian, who won the overall in the pro, anyone who you saw and you were like, oh, this is a special competitor that you're excited to see their future?
Yeah, I mean, I knew kind of them heading into it, like they would be front runners. I think Brian was probably the bigger surprise, like him winning the whole thing, because we were kind of thinking maybe Ben, because he's just so peeled and so balanced, and plenty of size. And Brian, I saw him compete at the Monster Mash, and he won that show, but not with the type of conditioning that he had at Worlds. So you could tell he brought another level of conditioning. And with his size and his shape, it's very hard to beat. But I think just like there wasn't like of course, I'm impressed by specific individuals, but I think across the whole, like I said, just to see so many different countries there and the quality of athletes, and kind of, going like taking myself all the way back to 1993, just to see what natural bodybuilding is today. Like, I would have never thought it would look like that 30 years ago. So to me, I'm like, what's it going to look like in 30 years from now? And oftentimes we hear that 5-year window being thrown out all the time. Like, it's like, no, I mean, look at these guys. You got, what's really cool. This is cool. Like, Ben is what, 21? I'm 52. So what's he going to look like at 52? If I can come in my best shape at 52, what's he going to look like at 52? It's mind-boggling. It's cool. It's really cool to see. That's what I really enjoyed. Like I was a fan at the same time being there, like backstage, seeing all these different physiques and the craziness of it, being out in the audience and seeing the craziness of it. I'm like, hey, it's just really awesome to see the sport thriving, because obviously natural bodybuilding sometimes gets a knock on it because it's natural bodybuilding. It's like, no, these guys are crazy physiques. It's impressive.
Yeah, now all the natty witch hunters trying to be like, then I don't know if they're natural, you know. But yeah, I actually think I was aware of Brian DaCosta for a long time, because I think there was some associated with Matt Ogus at some point many years back. So I think I was aware of him, but I hadn't seen him for a long time. And so he kind of came out of the woodwork, like you said, and didn't really quite, I guess, respect how much muscle he was carrying until I heard him on the Natty News podcast and he said his weight and his height. And I was like, okay, so this guy's a monster.
He's a beast. Yeah. And I saw him at the Muscle Mayhem. He I forget I think it was the year, Eric? Yeah, what might have been 2019 or 2018? I can't remember. But he won the heavyweight class, I believe. And then Marvin, I don't know if you know Marvin, I forget his last name, won the lightweight class. And Marvin beat him in the overall. And the only reason Marvin beat him was because Brian at the time did not really know how to pose too well. And I remember sitting in the audience watching that overall going, if this guy knew how to pose, he would dominate, but he just didn't have the posing. Well, now it's kind of cool to see him it's only a few years removed from that, got the size, the symmetry, the conditioning, and the posing is there. So it's like the whole package is there. And yeah, he's definitely well deserved as far as winning that overall.
Did you have him winning it when you were watching? Was he like, did you have him first, or did you even try an order?
So I'll be completely honest, I did not see the overall.
Okay.
So
that's fair.
So my thought coming off, like when I got done with my class, my first thought was, I want to see my family. Saw my family in the lobby. And then I literally took pictures with people for over an hour straight.
That makes sense.
So I did not see the overall. And even Eric was Jeff, come on, we got to go see the overall. And I'm like, and you know, part of it was too, we had a couple athletes that were still competing after I was done. I told him, I'm not working today. I'm an athlete and I want to spend time with my family. He's like, I respect that. So yeah, I kind of did my own thing. But I've seen the video footage after. And to be honest, yeah, I feel like Brian was definitely deserving of the win.
Yeah.
He wasn't as conditioned as Ben, but the overall package, like it's hard to deny that size. He was lean enough. Yeah, in my opinion.
Yeah, from what I've seen, that's kind of been my takeaway from it too. I kind of expected, in my head, I was thinking that Benjamin was going to take it just because of his season. Like, yeah, he was like undefeated going into it, and he just has such impressive symmetry, and he's just so well put together, and muscle bellies, and like his glutes just look ridiculous from the rear, just like perfect lines through them. But when Brian beat Barda, I was like, hey, yeah, that makes sense that he's going to go and win the overall here, because Barda's like a reigning champ. So yeah, it was an incredible Worlds, and I can only, like you said, it's exciting to see where it's going to go in future now, because there was a time, I don't know when it was, it may have even been this year or last year, where people were like saying, hey, is natural bodybuilding dead? Is a natural bodybuilders even getting better, or are we just like, we've stalled, and we're like all this science and I don't know, evidence-based practice and all of this education that people like yourself through 3DMJ and this coaching, like is actually making people better? And I'm guessing I know your answer, but I don't know if you already essentially said like, hey, it's come a long way since I first competed at Worlds.
It's like, what I see is size-wise, I think there's a lot of similarities, guys 10, 20 years ago, size-wise. I think across the board, though, like the talent pool is expanded and the conditioning level, like we're seeing that at earlier ages. Like the amateurs is a good example, right? You go to a local amateur show, there's guys with shredded glutes. That was kind of unheard of 10, 15, 20 years ago. You wouldn't see amateurs with shredded glutes. Now it's almost a standard. So I think as a whole, the sport is definitely elevated. As far as like the elite of the elite of the elite, there's some similarities. Like you can probably take like, you know, the Doug Millers of the world, Rob Hope, you know, you could take all these great champs from different eras and put them all in one stage, and it would be like, okay, this is pretty awesome. But, like any other sport, it's hard to compare eras, because obviously I think the overall education now is obviously superior than it was back then. Like you go on the internet and you can learn everything now. It's at your fingertips, where back then you had to kind of scour the magazines for it. So yeah, it's definitely elevating. So again, it's like 30 years from now, what's it going to look like? I'll be 82, so you won't see me up there anymore. At least I hope not.
Yeah, I think the thing you said there in terms of like the number of competitors now being competitive and getting in condition, I don't think that would have happened. I think you're always going to have the elite of the elite who like they just are born to be this bodybuilder, like Benjamin at 21. Like how many 21-year-olds do you have like being able to do that with the same protocols that he's had? There's only going to be a very small number of people that can do that. But the breadth of competitor now coming in, the fact that Worlds is so big, and it feels like it's getting more attention. I think having watched the live stream and seen the photos, this was a really well ran WNBF Worlds, which I think is super important, because nothing worse. You probably had it tons of times, Jeff, when you get photos back and you're like, man, that doesn't really represent what I thought I brought to stage. I look better at home, like under my lighting.
Yeah, I haven't seen like the professional pics just yet, but as far as like the live stream, from what I've seen of it, what I've heard from it, people watching it, like it was really good quality. And my experience from 2019 at Worlds to this one, vastly different. Because in 2019, it was a one show format. It was just way too long. People were tired, and my wife was exhausted. Whereas this one was a 2-day format. The venue was nice. It ran real smooth. I heard on one podcast that someone complained about the expediters being maybe a little too aggressive, which they were the first day, because they care. The reason they were aggressive because they care. They want to make sure the show was well ran, well organized. And you got to remember, as athletes backstage, we kind of don't know what's going on, right? Like, we're like, how's the show going to flow? Same thing with expediters. They're human. They in their mind, they're trying to organize and structure it ahead of time, but not until real time when you start to feel things out. So it took them maybe an hour or two. Then they started to get like more of a flow. They started to relax a little bit more, and then it flowed from there really well. The second day for pros, like it was really flawless pretty much as far as like the flow of it. So I think sometimes like it's easy for us as athletes, spectators, etc., to complain about shows, the promoters, expediters, and things like that. But deep down, they have our best interests. They want to do a good job. They're trying. And it's like we have to have some empathy towards that. So for me personally, it does kind of frustrate me when I hear some promoters and expediters get bashed a little bit like that. Because think of it this way too, as athletes, could we be doing a better job of getting in shape and posing better and representing the sport better for the audience, for the people watching the live streams? I think it kind of goes both ways.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I personally would prefer them to be a little bit aggressive than like lax, because you don't want to miss your time on stage or your slot on stage.
Yeah.
That would be the ultimate worst thing if they weren't like getting you at the point.
There's always that one guy, right? Like, where's 63? He's in the bathroom, or he's doing something off in the distance. They can't do the show until 63 shows up. So now the audience is waiting, the judges are waiting. So there's always that side of it too. There's always like a bunch of different perspectives and layers to look at.
Have you guys at all discussed like a 3DMJ classic or anything like that? Have you got anything? I'm sure you've thought about it. Yeah.
Like the Olympics are every 4 years. We've kind of floated that idea around, like we're going to do like the 3DMJ class every 4 years. In our minds, we're thinking like, okay, instead of like not being able to see the judges' scores, like having a digital screen, like a live judging, like you see the symmetry round, you go from one quarter turn to the next, you're like, 62 is in the lead versus over 64. Can 64 catch up? It's like trying to spice it up that way. But yeah, we've floated the idea around, but we also understand what it would take to actually promote a show, to organize it. Like there's a lot that goes into that. I don't know if we had the bandwidth, the energy, and the time to do it. So.
I don't think promotion, I don't think that would be an issue. I think it would, I think there'd be a lot of people, like even I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, I would go and do this. So I think you'd get a lot of people wanting to just fly out just to do the 3DMJ Classic. Like, I don't think promotion would be your problem, but the organization is a lot.
But let me flip it on you. If Revive Stronger said, hey, we're going to do this big show in the UK, like I might put that on the map, you know? So
this is true. This is true. So yeah, I guess talking about, you mentioned it, you don't know your future plans. What are you thinking? What's there? I know you've already mentioned it on some posts. Like, what are you looking, if you were to come back, like there's things to improve upon even for yourself, you feel like?
You know how it is when you get done with the show in the season, especially when you have a successful one, you're motivated. I'm like, yeah, I know I could get in there, kick some ass and maybe get a top 3 and improve. Like I'm not that old yet, but I also know that this is emotions and I need to allow more time to go by to gain more clarity. Because like I said, from a time component, like I took so much of my family's time and energy away. So I know I need to, like the recovery diet's not just about the recovery diet. It's also about letting the family recover and getting back to some normalcy. But I mean, I don't think I'm retiring, like, because I thought maybe that was a possibility. I feel like there's more to this than just me placing well and competing on a personal level. I think just people kind of get a lot out of just me going through the experience and paying it forward. So that's a big part of the purpose and the why for me. So I can see myself continuing to do it from that perspective. But I do feel like I can possibly improve. Like if I was 2 or 3 pounds leaner, could I have hung with Dirk better from the front? You know, I think width wise, like my lat spreads and all that, like I'm wider than he is. You know, size wise, it's not like he's dwarfing me. It's just like he's so conditioned, like he just pops, right? Like when you see like the whole lineup, you look at the lineup, you're like, your eyes go to him because he's just more conditioned than everybody else. So it's like if I was on that level, could I compete with him better? I'm not saying I would beat him, but would I be more, you know, relative? So I feel like I can make improvements in certain areas. The big question is, do I want to? Do I want to fully commit to that? And right now I say yes because I'm so motivated because I'm coming off a high, but that can change in a month from now. And I know I need to give myself permission to allow more time to go by. And I think as competitors, even with my athletes come off the stage, they're always on to the next thing, right? Even Eric Helms, he's so motivated right now.
Top 5.
I haven't really talked with him about it, but I'm like, man, he's just like really motivated. He's really, because I think for him, he's realized he's a really good bodybuilder. Like for a while there, like I don't think he had full belief that he was actually that good. And I think when you go to a world championship and you're like, hey, I didn't come in last place, I actually belong. Like I have more room to improve. So you just get these high emotions. So I think it's always good as athletes, like we give ourselves permission to slow things down, smell the roses, enjoy what you just accomplished. Because I just devoted an entire year of my life to this ultimate goal. So I deserve to actually like enjoy it. And we're always going to train. Like I'm always going to like lift weights, and I'm always going to lift hard, and I'm always going to eat enough. I'm going to try to sleep better, of course. So I'm still doing the things that's going to continue to improve me. I don't have to like be 100% present towards like the next goal yet.
Yeah.
But I still have those things going. So that's kind of where I'm at. But I can see myself potentially getting back on the world stage 20, maybe even 24. Because like I said, I can do it 3 months. As long as I keep my body weight where it needs to be, 3 months, I can go and I'll be right there again. Or maybe 3.5, because I need to be a little bit leaner.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that's good advice generally for people. I think I've had competitors this year who, I don't know, they could be ecstatic with their placing or even down on it. And then they're already thinking about what next. It's like, hey, just take a bit of time to like really reflect upon what you managed to achieve this time round. And I think sometimes we don't appreciate that in the moment. So I think that's really good advice, especially because this will come out and a lot of people just have probably finished their seasons and probably a lot of people getting into their next as well.
Yeah. I don't think they appreciate it, but also too, I don't think they have the clarity yet. You gain more clarity with more time.
Yeah.
Like I appreciate like every season I've done, like I appreciate 2014 so much more now than I ever have. Because it's like, man, that like top four at Worlds. Like I don't think I don't appreciate it as much back then as I do now.
Yeah.
So but yeah, let time pass. Eat some more chocolate cake, you know. Maybe train 4 days instead of 6 days right now. Just ease up a little bit, enjoy life, recharge the batteries, and then you'll get clarity, then come back again.
I think that's really well said. And actually, as a side note, I think I heard Eric talking about Eric, and I know he has that top 5 kind of pro placing that he wants at WNBF Worlds 2025. I believe he's placed it on himself. Mm-hmm. And I think I heard he's going to like cap his off-season body weight now. I think, is that something now you're going to be like, hey, I'm going to stay a bit leaner in this off-season because, like you said, you just don't have the benefit. There's not a benefit to you going like higher in body weight and pushing body fat higher.
No, I think I get to a certain point. It's almost like it's counterproductive. And like I said earlier, like being 52, history of heart issues on my dad's side, it's more for me like high priority and a motivator is overall health. So that's keeping my habits in place. So it's not like in the past, it would have been like, okay, I got to go eat big now because I got to try to get bigger. I'm allowing my body weight to creep up. But now it's like, I have the foundation. I don't think, realistically speaking, I'm going to be gaining tons of muscle at this point. I have past experiences that kind of tell me that. Like, there's nothing in the last 10 years as far as the bodybuilding science it's pointing that if I do these things, I'm going to start packing on a bunch of muscle. Other than things that we probably shouldn't be doing. And obviously I'm not going to do that. So it's like, just keep myself at a healthy body weight where I can perform well, I can recover well, still live life, you know, the social dynamics and all that really well, and keep me within striking distance if I choose to compete again, because it's easy to eat yourself out of decision. If I go 20 pounds over stage weight, well, guess what? I'm not competing in 2024. It's going to be 2025 or 2026 because I'm going to need that much more time on the way down. And then you got to factor in the logistics, right? Like finances, family, like all these other things you got to think about when you're game planning the big picture.
Yeah, and I think staying a bit closer plays into your kind of want to be a lightweight and maybe get even more conditioned because less to take off, hopefully a bit less stressful. So
from a competitive standpoint, exactly. Yeah.
So that's very exciting to know that, hey, it may even be next year. Let's see. I'm not going to put any pressure on you. But as always, I'm going to be keeping up with your journey. And Jeff, just thank you so much for your time today, taking us through your prep and obviously like past experiences as well and what you've learned along the way and continue to learn about yourself. And I think that's probably what all of us love bodybuilding for, is because, again, it kind of complements our life in many ways. Like it doesn't for short periods of time, but overall it brings about lots of positives and lessons and lots of growth, I think. And I appreciate yourself and 3DMJ for all the work you do and for sharing it too, because a lot of people don't. And I think it's really helpful for a lot of people, and it's inspired a lot of people, and obviously all the education too. So from me and the audience, a big thank you. And if people aren't already following you, where are you sharing most of your journey, Jeff?
Instagram. So 3DMJ _Godfather, and then Team 3DMJ at YouTube, and then we'll do 3dmusclejourney.com. And Perfect. I appreciate you having me, giving me a platform to be able to share it. It means a lot. And I know you got a big audience, so hopefully they gain, a lot out of this. And yeah, so again, just thanks for having me, not just now, but all the times before it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeff. And guys, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing thing is that you can start whenever you want. The mini-cup movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.